Well, preparations have been finalised for the funeral of South Africa's ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, in KwaZulu-Natal. It's happening this morning. Mthethwa's funeral service will be taking place at the Siyabonga Sangweni Sports Complex in KwaMbonambi, in the northeast of Richards Bay. Let's cross to SABC News anchor Bongiwe Zwane, SABC News specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena, also standing by. They, of course, are live at the Siyabonga Sangweni Sports Complex to give us updates on the preparations. Bongi, I dare say good morning on the somber note. We obviously know that the son of the soil returns home. And if we look at the preparations, also now having been accorded a special official funeral category 2 by President Cyril Ramaphosa, the preparations, the full program of action, the involvement of local community at large. Talk to us about those preparations as we bid closer to that final adieu.
A very good morning to you, Liesl, and good morning to the viewers as well. And there is, of course, quite a lot happening here around us. We can see the final preparations are currently underway here at Siyabonga Sangweni Sports Complex. This is where the funeral service is going to be held. And Liesl, what I can also tell you is that the GCIS also saying that there are going to be some road closures, particularly between the funeral service as well as to the burial site, in order to ensure that the cortege does move without some interruptions. Also, at the same time, you're then expecting a number of, the community members of KwaMbonambi to come here and bid farewell to their son, as some of them have been telling us that he was one of them. He was a man that even the local councillors found it easy to approach, especially when they had some backlogs or even finding some red tape or experiencing difficulties with some of the projects that they would be busy with as far as the community is concerned. And this is also an area where he showed quite an avid love for soccer, and even learning just how at some point he would be sent to be herding cattle, but he'll then just divert and quickly go from his parents when he returned home. But last night, Liesl, we were also in conversation with someone whom was a dear friend to him, not only a comrade within the ANC, but also a friend, and that is Dr. Malusi Gigaba, who speaks about Nathi Mthethwa, that he was the best man at his wedding, but also one of the Lobola negotiators, and also telling us that Nathi was also a Pan-Africanist and someone who wasn't only concerned about the state of South Africa. And as I bring in Sophie Mokoena, our specialist correspondent this morning, we'll talk about that very aspect, given the fact that there are some developments around the continent and also developments in the Middle East that he would have been seized with, given the fact that he wanted to make sure that, the world is a better place, not just South Africa. And Sophie, as I bring you into this particular conversation, let's talk about Nathi, because you think about the fact that he was an ambassador, South Africa's ambassador to France. But while he was there, he's a man who was seized with investment opportunities for the country, but also seized with what's taking place in the Middle East, and would have been expressing his opinion about what's taking place in Madagascar.
Well, as I pointed out yesterday, that with the African National Congress, when you are being nurtured, when you are being mentored, it's not only about the country, but it's about the continent and the world at large. And therefore, a person like Nathi Mthethwa had a very strong view in relation to the global perspective, but particularly the continent of Africa. As you heard yesterday, Malusi Gigaba saying that he was also a historian, and therefore when you talk about the ANC's political education, the international relations is part of what you have to get to understand. And that is why even during the elective conference, there would be a time where they discuss issues that are related to the globe, but particularly to Africa. As you know, that the African National Congress, the oldest liberation organization on the continent, it was launched with the intention to unite the Africans, not only South Africans. That is why during its formation in 1912, you had many people who came, and the kings and those people who were leading Africans on the continent as part of uniting the continent. And therefore they grow up as members of the ANC, fully aware that whatever they do, it's not about South Africa only, but it is also about the continent. And that is why it was easy for him to be deployed in the diplomacy as the Department of International Relations, moving from a ministry to becoming a diplomat. And a diplomat in a very strategic country such as France, right in Europe, where you have to strengthen the relations because it's an important region for South Africa. And I think you spoke about the issue of Middle East. He was very vocal about the situation in Palestine. We saw a video that was making the rounds, and this video became viral even in the Middle East when people heard of the passing of a South African diplomat, people playing that video to say this were his views as it relates to the question of the Middle East. And you'd recall that during the General Assembly last month, on the margins of the General Assembly, ahead of that, we saw France leading the charge in terms of the recognition of the Palestine as a state. And this could be the work that was done behind the scenes with all the different diplomats as it relates to countries that are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And he could have done that, but you spoke about Africa. Yes, the situation in Africa, he wanted to see a peaceful Africa. But of course, we wake up to the news of Madagascar, and the question would be, what would have been his reaction, because he was a Pan-Africanist.
And Sophie, will continue you and I with our conversation in just a moment. But let me take you to Samgele Masego, who is currently at the home, KwaMbonambi, as Nathi's body will now be exiting the homestead one final time. And he is never to return to that homestead. And Samgele, in fact, on standby there. And Samgele, quite a somber and a very difficult day for the Mthethwa family.
Indeed, Bongiwe, it's quite a somber and difficult day for the Mthethwa family here in KwaMbonambi. Just as my colleague shows you these visuals behind us, Tabomtweni, you can see some family members are up and about already preparing to go to the Siyabonga Sangweni Stadium, where ultimately the funeral service category 2, as declared by President Ramaphosa, will ultimately commence at 9 o'clock sharp this morning in order to meet that 12 o'clock deadline that are within the customs of the Nazareth Baptist Church. You saw yesterday earlier on there was a marquee that was erected here outside the family home where those two ambulances are currently parked. That was done in order to perform rituals, in order to know that if someone passes away through an accident, they have to be cleansed, they have to have some ceremony performed, and they have to connect with their ancestors in order to ask and seek permission for them to come into the homestead. You also saw yesterday evening by that gate that is opening there right now, they did put the casket on the ground as they entered the yards or the gates of the Mthethwa clan family homestead in order to seek and to speak to the ancestors to allow their son, their fallen son Nathi Mthethwa, to come into the family home, and then his remains were then put inside that particular roundabout. And you had the elderly community, the elderly members of the Mthethwa family in that particular rendezvous, in that hut, with him throughout the course of the night, with him, and then ultimately now this morning, they will now take his remains out of the family home, Bongiwe, and go to the stadium at the Siyabonga Sangweni Stadium, where the Category 2 funeral will ultimately take place. But there are following traditions and customs that have been followed in years immemorial of the Mthethwa clan, dating back to the days of when the family nurtured and brought up Ilembe, King Shaga. That will ultimately mean that today will be those proceedings where this area of KwaMbonambi, in the main, most of the community members of this area, the Nazareth Baptist Church is the most common church within this area. Thus, that is why the burial never took place yesterday and is taking place today on a Sunday, and they will start with the official government program at about 9 o'clock sharp this morning at the stadium. ANC leadership will come through to the family home to go with the family and the cortege to the stadium, and also for the for the casket of Nathi Mthethwa to be undraped from the colors of the black, green and gold studio.